Hello and welcome to Tell Us Your Effing Story, a podcast by franchisors for franchisors that goes behind the scenes of some of the most interesting characters in the franchising sector. I'm your host, Bruce McFarlane, with my co-host, John Sully, and today we're joined by Keith Doyle, CEO of BDC Property Partners.
Righto, Keith. Tell us your fucking story.
John?
Yes.
It's a franchising story, not...
Sorry.
Thanks for the welcome, by the way. Anything to do with Mr. Sully, there's always a different tangent things go on, so this could be an interesting hour. To tell you my story, well, maybe do you want to give me a couple of questions first, or
No, go right back.
Okay. How far do we go back? I'm from Dublin in Ireland. The area I'm from actually is probably most famous for one Irishman, Conor McGregor. I was born and raised in a place called Crumlin, which is a very working class part of Dublin, Dublin 12. We do actually have a lot more famous people from that area, funny, but for whatever reason, the media have stuck on Conor McGregor. But Paul McGrath, very famous footballer from Manchester United in Ireland, grew up in Crumlin. A very famous band called Tin Lizzy, a singer called Phil Lynott, he was from Crumlin. So that's where I was born and raised. And I lived there until I was about 15, and I ended up moving to a very well-to-do suburban Dublin where my parents lived and were actually next-door neighbours, and ended up marrying at a very young age.
So we'll go back to school. So
school,
how'd you go at school in
School was in Crumlin CBS. So Crumlin CBS was a Christian Brothers school, obviously, and it was a tough environment, to say the least. But I think you looking back, I think the environment is something you look at differently versus growing up in the area. So I probably didn't realise how rough it was and how tough it was. But look, it was a great. I mean, I felt I had a great upbringing, and the school was good. I wasn't somebody that was necessarily a Rhodes Scholar. I think that's fair to say. I was very interested in sport and saw myself as a soccer player, and that's what I wanted to do. That was my passion. Probably like 95% of kids, right across the world. And I just simply wasn't good enough. So that realization came about probably about 16, I think, But so school was good, but it was interesting because at 15, when I finished my intercert, which is, let's say, your halfway mark, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I said to my parents, I'm checking out for a year. Now, you hear a lot of that now, and kids check out, but they check out after year 12 in Australia. So that was really unheard of. And to be honest, there was some debate around that, but I did. So my dad said to me, you got to go and get yourself a job if that's what you're going to do. And I said, well, okay. So my first job...
How old's this, man? So
I was 15.
This is like 15?
15,
right, okay,
15, right. Yeah. So my first real job, let's say, where I had an expectation and I needed to be on time, and I was in a pub in Milltown, funny. So... I worked there for a period of time and then soon realised that wasn't a great decision. So I went back to school, to a different school. I went to a school called TUYFS, which was an Irish school, still in Crumlin. And I went kind of back as a mature student nearly, because I took a year out. So that was interesting. A lot of pals I played soccer with were in that environment, so I was comfortable. And then I set my leaving cert there and changed my whole philosophy around school and education and stuff. Not in a big way, but I got stuck into the books. And did okay, did quite well. My favourite subject was biz org and history, and I got a couple of A's in both of those subjects, and then kind of just got by with the rest of them. English I liked as well. So that was school, yeah. So it was kind of two stages. It was Crumlin CBS in the primary and the secondary, and then the small break, and then on to TUYFS to finish out. And then I started a marketing degree in Crumlin College, actually, which I didn't enjoy. So I went back on then to do a little bit of further education when I got older. I went to Dublin Business School.
What did your dad do? What did your mum and dad do?
Mum and dad are very working class. My dad's early days, he worked in a place called Ringsend, in a meat products factory. He drove a truck for those guys. So very vivid memories of, like, you know, school holidays, being brought to work with my dad in the back of the Volkswagen van, going to we used to go to the slaughterhouses. So all the slaughterhouses, collect all the meat, back to the processing plant in Ringsend, and that was his early stages. My mum was a stay-at-home mother. I've got 2 brothers and a sister. And then, later on in life, she worked a little bit in the... she was I think you have it here in Australia, but Tupperware. So she was like a Tupperware rep, you know, and did really well, actually, because my mum... Everyone tells me I get my sales ability from my mum. So she was quite good at that. And then my dad kind of ended up... he ended up getting into the taxi business, and we actually went into business together then later on when I kicked on, and we had some taxis together. So before he retired. He retired actually early, my dad. He had some heart problems, and he retired quite early. He was mid-50s when he retired, so yeah.
But did you get your work ethic from them, do you think?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, possibly. You know, I think, yeah. Look... my drive and determination came from probably my upbringing initially, in terms of, you know, what I wanted and what I didn't have, you know, and was probably one of the kids that, and this will sound probably, I don't want to reflect this bad on my parents, but I was probably one of the kids that didn't always have the new bike, or didn't always have the, but they provided for us, you know, immensely well. That innate drive, not really sure where that came from. I think just there was a bit of a hunger to succeed, I think.
Yeah, right.
What about the soccer dream? When did the soccer dream finish?
Oh, look, it never really finished, does it? We all see ourselves, you know. My son keeps telling me now, we have great debates about, he keeps talking about all these different positional plays now, and I say, mate, it's all bullshit. You know, it's not how it was played in those days. Look, you know, I kept playing. Actually, I played amateur, and I used to get a few quid playing while I was kind of in college and stuff. So I kept playing. I just wasn't, you know. My brother went to the UK at 15 as a very talented prospect, and unfortunately, he didn't even make it. You know, it's a very small percentage that do. And then he came out to Australia actually after his career. And had a good career here actually in the old MSL. So so I kept playing right up to, I actually kept playing until right up to where I realised that the business was going so well. If I get injured on a Sunday, I'm screwed. Because I used to jump on a plane on a Monday morning and spend 2 to 3 days in the UK a week for my business. I'm probably getting slightly off track here, but yeah, the soccer dream kind of came to a halt when I started having to get ahead of my competitors and fly out on the last flight from Heathrow on Dublin on a Sunday afternoon. So my game then was like, okay, I need to hang up the boots. So I made that decision, and I was crap anyway, the lads tell me so.
So before we get to the business stuff that you're involved in, like what other job, you worked at a pub, you realised that wasn't for you. What other things did you do on the way through?
Mate, I tell you, I didn't have too many jobs throughout my life. My very first job was on a milk float for the milkman that delivered our milk. I worked in the pub for a while, and then I had some part-time work in retail and fashion. That's how I started my business. That's kind of where it all stemmed from. So that was just for a couple of different retailers, 2 different retailers in the city. Just small businesses, you know. I tell you, Bruce, it was funny, mate. Like when I came to Australia, Myer was my kind of first job, my first real job, because I was self-employed. I mean, I started my business in '92, you know, at like 21, 22. So, I didn't have many jobs. And
were you like a rat bag as a kid, or because you're a rat bag as an adult?
Probably the wrong person to ask. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. I was. I think
well
I was
behaved.
relatively well behaved, as you know, as we all like to think of ourselves. Maybe not a halo exactly, but
we might come back to that. I think I have a story.
So starting a business, you know, you when you're young and you know, didn't have a lot of funds behind you, so it's not like you had a big check to go and start spending the money. So how did you get the money together to get the business and the idea of the business?
Yeah. Look, that was a really interesting time. I think. I had no experience. I had no family business experience. I had no mentor. I had nothing really, to be honest. I saw an opening. I saw a gap, basically, when I was working part time in the industry. There was a particular retailer that was struggling. And basically, at that time, there wasn't many retailers struggling in what we did, because things were really starting to turn in Ireland. This was kind of just before the Celtic Tiger, and business was quite good. And he had a pretty good location where he was, and he was an older guy and he just got it wrong. So that was where I saw the opening. The reality was, in terms of the financing and funding, there was a very unfortunate situation in the family that led to me being able to access finance, which was, I had an aunt of mine, my mom's sister, which she had an accident late in life. She was blind. So she guaranteed me my first loan, basically, with the AIB in Clonskee. I think at the time the rate was something like 17%. So I borrowed about £20,000 at the time. So it was before we went to euros.
So this is the early 90s.
Yeah, 91, which was a lot of money, you know. Plus, like, I mean, I don't know when it all really started, but like, let's say a business plan. My business plan, I fucking wrote it on the back of a stamp. It was, I had a vision, I had it all in my head, and I knew what I needed to do, but I wasn't able to articulate that particularly well in the bank, really. But I think the bottom line was she was guaranteeing the loan, so the bank just signed off.
So it didn't matter, yeah.
So it didn't really matter. So really unfortunate circumstances to get me started. And then from there, it was a partnership. So I basically went to this guy. I knocked on his door and I said, okay, you know, you're not going to have a business in 12 months. I think we both know that, but I can help you. But here's what I want. And mate, took us 2 meetings. I went to see him then at his house the second time. I didn't have an accountant, so I looked to my family's, my wife's. It wasn't my wife at the time, and they were kind of quite. My mom's or my wife's mom was come from family business and stuff like that. So anyway, we used I used that accountant, which I ended up finishing off with, and two of us went to the guy's house and we kind of cut a deal. So yeah, so that's how I started. And I had he was gone within a year, you know, which was kind of like a little bit messy at the end and how it finished, but it wasn't going to work basically.
So what was it at that point? How many just?
Yeah, just a store. No, it's just a store. Yeah,
one shop.
Just one store. Yeah. I mean, I never really, you know, I grew my business to a point where, you know, I didn't have 50 stores, but like at that stage it was one store, and it was, you know, he wasn't profitable. He was profitable previous to that, and funny enough, he actually had a partner, a very successful guy that went on and did what he did. They split up, actually opened the store right across the road, had a store called Hairy Legs, and a lot of kids will remember that, and. But he just didn't know what he was doing, right? So and things really started to change then, because the rave scene happened in Dublin at the time, and music was, you know, so closely connected as it is now to teenagers. So, but I soon realised when I opened that business that I didn't want to be in menswear, so I changed it to ladies' wear. But I had a rip roaring ride for a couple of years. I rebranded it. The store was called Sonic. I had DJs. It was 3 stores, 3 flights to the store, different levels. You know, we did footwear. I was doing all the Air Max now, Nike that they do. I was, you know, selling all the baseball caps from the States, doing all the American gear, which I was buying on the grey market. I had DJs come in. We were the place to go to. So it was great, but I kept a very close eye on the industry, and basically where I felt myself sitting was in that kind of teenage ladies, and that's where I eventually went, which I opened Miss Moneypenny from the same building.
Right. So did you close the
I closed Sonic. It was called Sonic. I closed it down. I've got some great photographs. My wife, luckily now, after all these years, but we've got photographs of the building. I got into a lot of trouble with the council, and we graffitied the front of the building. Now, this building would be like on Burke Street. So you can imagine a DJ sticking out a speaker in the window on Burke Street on a Saturday with no license, and having a graffiti fascia on the building. They were interesting times, you know. So but I got a good run with that. But what I did was I stayed within that category, but it was purely all ladies, because that's where they were spending the money.
So what were you doing? How did you turn that around from a business that was struggling to something that was heaving like that? Like, what were you doing in the business? Were you on the floor?
Oh, initially, yeah. I was on the floor for a long time. Yeah, I mean, I always got my. That's where you need to be as a business owner. I don't care what size your business is or what scale, but if you're not talking directly to your customers, you're dead. And I mean, it doesn't matter what scale. And you need to do that directly. So no, I was heavily involved in that. John, that was simple, mate. Honestly, he was in a more formal menswear business, which was dying on its arse. You know, the money was within the kids, the teenagers, and basically I stripped it out. As I said, there was a young kid growing up in a place called Drogheda, and he was an up and coming graffiti artist. Reached out, got him up, painted a building, came up with a name. Sonic was like, as I said, the rave was huge in the UK at the time, so it was kind of like, okay, I want to tap that market. So I knew my market. I knew exactly what the market was. And as I said, yeah, we killed it. We absolutely killed it, and it really helped me kind of progress. The Miss Moneypenny thing then was just to the next level, you know, and that was a real strong trading name that resonated with everybody. I really am sorry in hindsight that I didn't keep that whole brand piece going. Could have done a lot with it. You know,
but that sort of business, I don't know fashion at all very well, but so much of it is, I would imagine, is about buying the right product. Because if you buy shit, you're not going to sell it. So how did you get around that? Did you have a buyer?
Okay. No. So basically, 95% of the product came from the UK and Turkey. Okay. And then there was Irish suppliers. So when I started off initially, my biggest problem was, it was probably one of the reasons I probably went from the menswear piece to Miss Moneypenny, was that there was a big chain in Dublin at the time called Unique Menswear, which is still trading now, and he blocked me at every turn with every major wholesaler across the UK, Manchester, Birmingham, London. So I found that a bit of a problem. So what I was doing was, my margins were suffering because I was buying the product on the grey market. So I was still going to Birmingham, I was still going to Manchester, I was still going to London, but I was buying it pretty much from dealers and retailers. So my margin wasn't great. So I was clever enough to understand that, you know, my margin needed to be at a level at least at my competitors, or if not better, to grow. So that was an issue for me. So eventually what happened with Liam was a very successful businessman at that stage. He'd pubs, restaurants, all sorts of stuff. He used to, you know, he drove a Bentley at the time. I don't think I ever saw a Bentley in my life, and he drove a Bentley. So I just fucking rang him and I said, mate, we need to have a chat, you know. He's like, who are you? I said, well, I'm your neighbour across the road from one of your busiest stores. I said, and you keep blocking me in Rajan Clothing, which is one of the big Manchester mobs. And he was intrigued. So he said, let's go and have a coffee. And he owned a pub down the end of the road on Liffey Street. So he made me pay for my tea as well, I think, the bastard. So we went and had a chat, and I think he was just he was impressed. You know, I was like green. I was, but you know, like I wouldn't say immature, but I was naive a little bit. You know, but basically how I sold it to him was like, mate, you've got so much money, my one shop ain't going to affect you. So can you just call the dogs off? And you know, the interesting thing was with Liam, and I'll never forget it. He my first order that came out of Rajan Clothing, we used to pay about 14 days and had 90 days credit on it because he covered it. So so that's
Wow.
how that started. So, but then when I went to the ladies wear, it was similar. A lot of the main suppliers were similar, but but there was a lot more. The ladies wear end was just much more. It was just better. It was busier. It was bigger. There was more opportunity. So when I ended up flipping, then I still had competitors, you know, obviously, but it was slightly different. I got a name for myself. I was quite well established then, and you know, in the good old days of cash, when I used to carry anywhere between £10,000 and £15,000 on a suitcase on an Aer Lingus flight on a Sunday, you'd be surprised how many Indians and Pakistanis would take your money. So getting stock in the end wasn't a problem.
Yeah, right. But it's impressive. How old were you then when you started? Was it Miss Moneypenny?
Miss Moneypenny, yeah. So limited name, my Technical Knockout Limited was my limited name. I never changed that. I just rebranded from Sonic to Miss Moneypenny. So it all started in 92. And actually, funny enough, would you believe, I opened on a Good Friday and I got broken into Friday night.
Great.
Yeah. And it was funny because Nike Air Max runners and there was a really big brand in the UK called British Knights trainers, and they were all similar kind of stuff, but it was really, really hot, and I got my hands on like 10 or 12 boxes of that, and they knew I had them because we advertised it locally, and that's what they came for. So that store, I ended up buying that building and the one next door as I progressed. But they got up through, it was next door to a department store, and they got up through the roof of the department store, jumped across and knocked down the wall with a Kango hammer. and that's how they got into the store. So, and I'd no money to fix it, like, you know, which was interesting. So that was another journey of a relationship I built up with a guy over the years, that I got the yellow pages out, which you did in those days, and went like, shit, you know. And he came in the middle of the night, and he brought a brickie, bricked it all back up, and then steel plated the whole back wall.
Wouldn't happen again.
And he was at my wedding, that guy. Since I got really friendly with him, I gave him a lot of work over the years. Anything I did, you know, he made my gates at home and did all that kind of stuff, you know, like. But yeah, it was interesting times, because you kind of go, I need to get it done, but I've no money, and you'll always find a way around, you know.
And store 2?
Store 2, I was probably in the city as well. Like I played around a lot in the city, because I, like, you know, the leasehold came up next door. There was an old guy in there called Raymond Heavey Electronics, and he sold stereos, and that business was dying on its arse as well. And he was my biggest thorn in my side, because every Saturday he was the one that called the police, and he was, you know, that kind of stuff, and I had the DJs in there. So trying to buy his leasehold was interesting, but we got there in the end. And again, probably got fairly friendly with Raymond to a point, in that I didn't realise, but he spent some time in the States at the Olympics with Maggie's parents, which I only found out probably 10 years later. So it was good that I didn't go too hard with him, but that was where the second one went. Yeah. And then around the city, then I kind of came up with this MMP concept, which is with Miss Moneypenny, but I didn't call it Miss Moneypenny. I just called it MMP, and I used to buy a lot of lines out of slightly, because the key to my business was fast fashion, but you needed the right style, the right colour, and that was the key to it. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't sell it. Mm. But there was so much other opportunity to get stock. So MMP was kind of a bit of a thing that I did, where I was still able to get really, really good margin, and kind of, they were pop-ups at the time. We didn't call them pop-ups then. It was just opportunities, you know. So I did a lot of that around the city, you know. So yeah, which was interesting.
You had, and you said you obviously had a business partner at the start that exiting him pretty quickly. So. Yeah. You know, he was older. He'd run a business. You're the young punk. You know, how did that go? That conversation to say, "Hey, mate, time to hang up the boots."
No, not good, Bruce. It wasn't good, because I suppose when he split from his partner, it was obvious that he was the weak link all along in that relationship, and then he got burned a little bit when they did separate. And then when he saw me come in and the figures went from here to here, he was like, "Great, I'm onto a good thing here." And I said, well, no, you're not, you know. Yeah. But I suppose the reality was I didn't set the exit strategy properly when I went in on the partnership, which is probably, from my perspective, was the mistake. So we probably saw a little bit more longevity in it than there was. But look, you know, he done okay in the end. I mean, you know, I think he got a fair price, you know, and I was lucky. It was nearly from cash flow I did it, would you believe? I didn't have to kind of, it was maybe a small bit of borrowing. I think at that stage I did increase my overdraft a little bit, because the banks were just throwing money at me. So I kind of worked it through cash flow.
But you're still only in your 20s at this stage.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah.
And so the banks are still, it's great that the banks are talking to you.
But banks, it's a bit like talent, isn't it? People don't ask you what age you are if you're doing what you, yeah.
The numbers were telling the story. So.
Absolutely. And I wasn't producing P&Ls or cash flow budgets or anything like that. In those days, you kind of like, unlike now, where you got net and you got gross, and you got your PAYE and you got your super, and you kind of. I think you need 4 accounts now in business, right? You need to have your ins, your outs, your payables, your receivables. I had one bank account, and it was like, well, it looked big enough to me, and I always knew how much I owed my main guys in the UK. I always knew how much I owed. I mean, it was very funny. I had one particular guy when things were going really, really well. He was a really prominent businessman in London, and he lived next door to Chris Tarrant, which is a famous radio host in the UK. And he used to have me over to the house on a Sunday when I used to fly in, because he was my first port of call on a Monday morning down in east end of London. And he called me one Christmas Eve, and I said, it's really nice of him calling me on Christmas Eve. And I said, what do I owe the pleasure? You know, he said, you owe me a lot of money. I'm just making sure you're still alive, and you'll be on a plane next week. I said, yes, happy Christmas to you too, and my flight's already booked.
So you schooling, you didn't have a lot of business mentors. You didn't have a lot of structured learnings, but you've learnt. Obviously, the cash flow is key in all of this.
But I didn't learn that, Bruce, though, even still. It was a lot later, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't, Say it honestly, I'd say my biggest advantage, would you believe, the paradox in this, I know it might sound silly, but honestly, my biggest advantage was my lack of experience and naivety. Because I can tell you, I took some risks in my journey, and if I had really known what the downside was to some of them, I wouldn't have taken them. So, you know, you do, I think you do need a degree of balls, but you also kind of, ignorance sometimes doesn't help, doesn't hinder, let's say. Sorry.
And always luck. Always a lot of luck.
Yeah. Well, look, I think in life.
No matter what anyone says.
Yeah. So, no, look, I had a BizOrg teacher in Crumlin, and he was a great fella. I loved the bones of him, and I used to listen in his class, you know, because it was hard when I went to school. I mean, there was, you know, there was a lot of play acting going on, and not a lot of people would listen. So I used to always listen to him. So yeah, I did have an interest in that. And I don't know where that really came from, to be honest, you know, but I did. So, but no formal, just seat of the pants.
But in all of that, obviously, it's all those things that you just said, luck and, you know, timing and whatever. But you got to be doing something right. So what do you think you were really good at during that time? What do you think? Was it identifying the gap? Was it your work ethic and your sales ability on the floor at the start? Or was it vision? What was it? What were you good at?
Oh, look, I think realising where the gap in the market was important. You know, it was really important. And I think what we did well was I was the visionary, so I was a step ahead of everybody. I mean, I created this marketing campaign where for every baseball jersey you bought, you got a free baseball cap. Now, I got a call from one of the retailers again, which was one of the, I mean, I was down here and this guy was up here, Marathon Sports he was called. And he called me and he said, well, how the fuck are you giving away a baseball cap? He said, you're buying them from where I'm buying them. And I said, I don't really know, but I said, you're ringing me. I said, so I'm obviously selling a few more baseball caps than you are.
Putting a dent somewhere.
And I put the phone down, you know. So, look, I think I was really good at that. So, yeah, looking at what everyone else was doing and then what we could do a little bit different was key. I think that was probably one of them. I mean, look, at that stage, when I went to the ladies' wear, John, I didn't really necessarily work on the floor, but every morning I got to the store, I did a walk and did that kind of piece, and that was really key. And I did, I mean, I tried it, you know, like, I did try and bring the business forward a little bit in the electronic world because that was all really new. So kind of, like, you know, I brought in a software system so I could look at reports and see what was selling. So, you know, I was probably one of few at the time to be able to be on a wholesaler's floor in London on a Monday morning with a report saying I need medium in white in that top or in that dress or in that skirt. And I kind of kept that going, you know, which was good because it was it was so finite, you know, getting it wrong and getting it right in that fast fashion, in that teenage space that, like, honestly, you could dump stuff and get burned pretty quickly, you know, really quickly. And you know, like everyone, we were all chasing the same dime to a point, so you did have to be a little bit different, you know.
So who did you have around you at that point? Who was on your team?
Well, it was pretty much a small team, but I did have family work for me. So my brother worked for me and my sister worked for me. So she was probably my lieutenant. She would have been, and look, they both were. I think she might have been with me from an earlier stage. So she came right for the journey, and then my brother kind of dropped out and then came back. So yeah, one of my biggest regrets was probably not having the foresight to give them skin in the game. Big regret.
And what were they doing within the business itself? Were they buying? Were they running the team?
Yeah, run the team, run the stores, open the stores, locking the stores, making sure stock takes were done, doing rosters, making sure people were paid. I bought 99.9% of the product. So if it failed, it was on me.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I was buying ladies' wear. But like, you read magazines, you look at the media, you look at what's going on. You knew from suppliers what was selling, what wasn't. You know, but it was ladies' wear. So it was, people used to say to me, "How do you buy women's wear?" So it's easy, really.
Did you ever feel the need to try it on at all?
No, I didn't.
Just asking.
No, I didn't quite get down that road. I'm sure many did, but no.
It's whatever works.
And you said you had the first business partner. Did you have another business partner later on, or
No,
you stayed
no. Well,
self-funded? You were the only shareholder.
Yeah. Well, if you want to call later on, I took a franchise model out of France.
Okay.
And let's call them a partner, and that was an absolute fucking car crash. Cost me a lot of money and a lot of pain and heartache.
So a separate brand you're running. So
separate brand, completely separate. But it's still a great business, still running. I always judge a great business if it's still going, right? You know, there's a lot of businesses set up over the years and are not there. Was it a great business? Well, if it's still a great business, it would still be operating. That business still operates. It's got, I think, I don't know, maybe 1,000 stores across the world. But they weren't the right partner for me, and I only opened 2 stores. I signed the rights for Ireland and the UK. I opened 2 stores as a trial and lost a lot of money. But so they were a business partner.
That's an interesting one. So why weren't they the right fit? What do you think were the key things that went wrong there?
So that was a children's wear retail business. Let's say kind of midsection. Okay, so I was in the low end on the fashion business. This was a kind of a mid price point, and I just felt the market in the UK was open. So it would have set probably a little bit above pumpkin patch type of thing, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So and they were the biggest in what they did. And I didn't go. I used to travel a lot. I used to go to every trade fair across Europe. I was, at that stage later on, I was dabbling in China. So I came across them actually in Barcelona. I saw there's a store in Barcelona and I went, oh, I like that. I came back and brought Maggie back with me. We looked at it. And I said, I actually really like this. And so I took a bit of a flyer on it, but it wasn't a good experience. It was they basically released 2 ranges a year. So if you didn't get the buying right, you were pretty much screwed. And I was used to buying on the phone, day to day. It was just product. And that was very different. And then when they start making dog's dinner of the distribution, and I was getting stock that should have been in Belgium or Azerbaijan, one day we got a delivery that should have been Beirut, would you believe? We got a delivery from the franchisee's store in Beirut. It was like, we're in trouble here. So replenishment was a big problem for me. But I put my balls on the line at that stage because I opened 2 stores. Fit outs cost me like probably about $1 million. And they didn't particularly trade well. So I was hemorrhaging money as well. Miss Moneypenny obviously in the background was kind of propping it up. But you can't... that's never a long-term strategy. So I got burnt on that badly. So I got in and got out.
You had no say about what?
No, I went back. I sat down with the owners, and it was a husband and wife team. To be fair, they were really good. They changed my structure around payment and stuff, and we tried to make it go over. But I knew at that stage I was screwed. And the double whammy with that was one of the locations was absolutely fantastic in a brand new shiny shopping centre. Let's say the equivalent to Chadston. A shopping centre called the Dundrum Town Centre, and that's still probably the main one in Ireland, and it's in Dublin. I couldn't change it. They wouldn't let me put Miss Moneypenny there because it was a precinct and it was all children's wear. So that really killed me. That took a lot out of me because it was like, I know it probably went okay there. And then the other location I opened was a kind of a smaller regional town, not far from where I lived at the time. And that too wasn't great. So everything being relative, it was a bit of a disaster. So I learned a lot of lessons, and it cost me.
So how many Miss Moneypenny stores did you have, or how sort of large did the business grow to then?
Yeah, I probably at that stage I would have had probably 7 or 8, 9, maybe something like that. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think what year I started the orchestra piece. From when I started it until I opened it and closed it was a very probably short period of time. Might have only been 2 years maybe, because like anything in life, you realise when you do something right pretty much very quickly, and you realise very quickly if you do something wrong. That's whether you're hire staff or whether you generally know. So it was a short space of time. But at that stage, I probably had more properties than I had shops, Bruce. In the end, I kind of went down a road where I saw that it was savvy to invest in property. And ultimately that was where I was going to, So even when I finished up, I had more houses than I had shops. I probably had more commercial properties than I had shops as well. But auction was good because it was a learning. And in business, you want learnings, right? And I can tell you, it put hairs on my chest.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're operating different businesses. You've got your property business over here. You've got your Your women's retail, and then you've got your kids' businesses.
And the property business I kind of ran, let's say, with Maggie, and she got involved in the Yorkshire business because it was kind of her flavour sheet. So we did kind of dance for a while in that together, where we didn't do. She was never involved in Miss Moneypenny. We had 3 kids, and Maggie was, she was involved in the singing industry at the early stages, so kind of she was pretty full on. But she was involved in auction a little bit, but I had a few balls bouncing at that stage, I don't like to talk about it actually. I haven't spoken about it in a while. It's been a while since I've told that story, but still, look, the business is still going. It's still retailers, it's still franchises. Yep. Maybe they're doing something right.
Yep.
So what happened? Where did it all go wrong?
Where the all go wrong moment probably didn't all go wrong, but it took a windy road, let's say, which could have not gone down that path. I think the auction thing was a bit of a kicker. My financial advice and structure probably wasn't as the way it should have been. Look, there's no doubt that the financial crisis did take some hold. I did see sales drop. Things started to get tight. I'd invested quite heavily in property at that stage, but I didn't do it as smart as I should have in hindsight. I didn't have different companies. I only had one company all throughout. The one company for the properties and the business? Or? Yeah. So how I set up... So the property piece was probably a little bit interesting in some sense. I was very lucky that the building where I first started came up for sale. So not long after, I probably, scraped a 20 grand loan with a bank guarantee. I bought a building in the middle of Brook Street for $1 million, right? £1 million, which is a lot of money. That wasn't an issue. But I suppose the Irish government introduced this, and a lot of people remember this, but they introduced a tax system, and it was just called Section 23, and it was an income tax facility. And because when I bought the building, I bought it in my own name, and then when I grew and I bought my warehouse, I bought it in my own name. So I had fucking massive income tax problems. So the accountant said to me, the government are releasing this scheme called a Section 23 allowance, and he said, we can buy property and we can offset your income tax. And I said, great, sounds like a plan. So I bought one, then I bought another one, then I bought another one, then I bought another one, and then, kept going, right? So I suppose, to any up-and-coming business or franchisor out there now, I'd say, it's so important to get your exit strategy fucking at the beginning, and I didn't. And it's also really important to understand that you won't know all the answers. And as a CEO, you get some of the best CEOs in the world, they're not going to know all the answers. I don't care what anyone will tell you. So you need to make sure you've got the right people around you giving you the right advice. And I didn't have that. And,
would you have listened?
Oh, I think so, because I knew I was out of my depth to a point, because I wasn't told the what if, and I wasn't told if this happens and that happens, you could be in trouble here. So I probably heavily invested in an area that I didn't need to. I probably should have done something else, I just diversified a little bit, basically. I probably had all my eggs in one basket. So so that's pretty much in a short synopsis, John, is say where it went wrong, because I lost a lot. I didn't lose everything when I came to Australia. I still had primarily a bit of chunky stuff. Like I still owned the building in the city. Although I had some terrible tenants, and that's another podcast in a sense. Because when things hit the wall, like getting rent from tenants, and I had a really big UK mob actually at the time, and they screwed me over big time. I actually had L'Occitane as a tenant in that building for a while, which were good, but they moved to a bigger one. So it wasn't all doom and gloom. Until after I got to Australia, until the banks they did pull the plug eventually. Yeah. I'm 11, 12 years coming up in Australia. I went home after 2 to a sporting event, actually back with my son, and I haven't been home since 9 years. But when I went back home, I sat with the banks, we had a chat, we said, okay, this is where we're at. Rising tide raises all boats, things were picking up a little bit, keep paying off the mortgages, I'll be back to where I need to be. And they agreed. Big chunk of my salary from Myer and stuff was going there. And then they pulled the plug, literally pulled the carpet, and they could, because the nature of my loans were set up that way, right? So, which was another thing, the small
probably
print.
Didn't need to.
Oh, probably not, because when I saw the building, I read about the building being sold in the paper probably 2 years after, a year and a half after. And when I saw what it went for, it was a bit of a. So where the building was, I had let's call it Myer, because it's Ireland's only department store called Arnott's. And Arnott's was here, and they had a lane for deliveries, and there was Zerep shoes, and then I owned the next two buildings. So I was in their way from a development like the family were next door, and probably about another 4 buildings. So I got offered a lot of money for that. At a time when things were absolutely flying and I was killing it, and I thought it was fucking the bee's knees. Don't get me wrong, I was quite humble. I spoke to a lot of people about that to say, should I hold, should I sit, should I sell? And the consensus was hold a bit longer because you'll probably get more, and that was a massive mistake.
So this is 2007, 2008, 2009, around this period. Is that when
the Arnott's conversation was? Probably start 2007, I think.
Yeah.
And I had a well-known Dublin firm acting for me on that, which the guys are good. I still contact one or two of them. But yeah, you just kind of think, is it worth more? Will I get more? Is this development going to happen? I'm right in the foreign line. They need my building,
Yep.
And at the time, I got offered north of £4 million, which fucking could have made a massive difference in my family's life. Yeah, look, cash flow wise, I was good. I never had any worries about money. We paid our bills. We had some, everything was good. So I wasn't hungry. I wasn't hungry to put food on the table. So I didn't feel I needed money. And I kept saying, I'll leave it for the kids. It'll grow. It'll be worth more. And if I have to sell it eventually, I might get an extra meal, right? That was so I kind of said, fuck it. I'm still trading. Keep going. But you do need someone on your shoulder, I think. And that's where there's one or two clients I've got now that are going well, where I do say, hey, the carnival ride does stop sometimes, and you do need to understand that
bank your wins.
That can happen to you too. So you kind of probably, but yeah, probably just, I don't know. It was one of those. That's probably not necessarily. It had the biggest effect on in my life, but it was my biggest regret, because I kind of felt I made a good decision. It was based on, a couple of different things, that I looked at it hard, right?
Yep.
So I don't think it was my biggest mistake, but it hit me probably more than anything,
And so you've come to Australia. So what drove the change to move to Australia and land at Myer?
Well, that was an interesting one, because we, you kind of, when you're working for yourself for so long, you become defined, my business defined me. So when it all went a little bit fucking pear-shaped, and I stopped retailing, but I had the properties, I was getting good rent, I kind of said, I'll take a year out, because I was wounded. I was pretty much wounded. I wanted to understand what I was going to do next. So luckily I was in a financial position that I could do that. But and I dicked around with a mate of mine doing a little bit. He was in the optical business. But we thought long and hard then about coming to Australia. I'd been coming to Australia before that for a good few years. I'd come here 2-3 times a year on golf. I used to come here for 2 weeks at a time.
Your brother was already.
My brother was here, exactly, yeah. And Maggie's brother was in Perth, and the sister was in Brisbane, which they still are. They're all still in Australia. So I was coming here quite regular. So we kind of came up with that idea. And then I kind of got cold feet, because I didn't know what I wanted to do still. And I wasn't sure whether things were going to pick up in Ireland, because things were so bad. I mean, look, you guys honestly have no clue as to how the GFC hit a small country like Ireland. There's more people in Melbourne than there is in the whole of Ireland. It is a small town. When you're in business, you'd be surprised. 2 or 3 of the top banks, and I was, I knew quite a lot of people and stuff. So it was hard for a lot of people. I had 1 or 2 friends commit suicide. It was tough. So how long that was going to last was a real question. And then that whole fresh start was kind of, plus I was fucking embarrassed. You kind of go really, am I going to hang around? What'll I do? All that kind of stuff. So anyway, long story short, we came over for 6 months, I think, or 4 months or 5 months, and then we came back and said, yeah, maybe we'll give it a go. But then I bottled it again. Came back again, did a shorter time, and then then we decided to come. So very, very strange, mate. I got talking to someone, and when I got back to Ireland the second time, I had a job offer from Myer within about a week in a kind of contract, and I think that was probably the thing that maybe just go, hey, will we do this? Will we take the jump? My eldest Killian was 11, so we kind of went, if we don't do this now, you just dragging kids all out. John knows that, he's had his stories there, I'm sure, which we'll do another podcast on. But so I kind of felt we got to do this now. And then you feel if you jump, if you think about it too much, you'll go no, because I bottled it the first time. Yeah, so look, that was the decision. And then my Myer journey started, my first real job, which was it was interesting. That was interesting, because people don't realise you come from a small place, and we lived in this place called Nace outside of Dublin. It was 25 k's. So we had a nice big house, and we loved the community, very small community, and great friends, great family. And then you get on a plane, you come here, and you go, oh shit, And we went to Noosa of all places when we first came, because Noosa was regional in those times. So the visa with Myer was regional, right? So. Now, how about that? There's a loophole that the Australian government closed pretty quickly, but Noosa. So I moved in the August, and Maggie and the kids came over in November. So we lived in Noosaville for about a year and a half, I think. My sister-in-law was good. She was in Parisian Beach, which was only like 5 k's down the road.
Great spot.
She had a business there, yeah. So that was good. So that made it a little bit easier. But it was a massive change for the family. It started a new journey, which was good, but tough.
And coming from Ireland, did you sort of know what that big shiny thing was in the sky? That big thing that sort of
look,
put out heat and light?
I'll be honest. I'd been to Perth because Maggie's brother was in Perth. I'd walked around golf courses there. I knew, but I think the intensity of that heat, and when I got to, it was like, it was a big change.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was a big change. It was just that humidity initially, to be honest. You know, and knowing that you weren't jumping on a plane and going home was interesting. So that lifestyle probably wouldn't have suited my family at the time. People say to me now, they look at me, and honestly, if I got a penny for every Australian that says it to me now, you fucking mad? You left Noosa? It wasn't right for us at the time, right? Melbourne is where we wanted to be. My wife told me that for the 2 years I was in Queensland, whatever. I don't know how long I was in Queensland, maybe a bit longer. 3 years probably. She reminded me that we came to Australia to be in Victoria, and pretty much where we did end up, because we were familiar with Red Hill, we were familiar with the peninsula. My brother lives in Sandringham, so that's where I had to get her to be beside the water. So, yeah. And
then you went from Myer to jewellery, large.
Yeah. So the Myer thing, That was a really interesting journey itself in Myer, but it ended, and I ended it because I wanted to get back to Melbourne, and they had me kind of travelling around a lot, and my family weren't enjoying that. So, I had no experience in jewellery. I had no idea, to be honest, Bruce, and I still don't. But they were the 4th largest jewellery retailer in the world, a New Zealand-based family, and it was a role that got me back to Victoria, and the head office was in Port Melbourne. So that's probably why I chose that role initially, to be honest. But plus, the main thing was probably the owners and founders. They're very entrepreneurial, and I was offered a profit share in that business from day one. So I liked how they structured it, and that was predominantly. So I was ticking 2 boxes there. It was kind of what I wanted in a role, but also got Maggie and the kids back to Victoria. So so that was a 5-year journey, I think, with that business, which taught me a lot. Very, very, very hard-working family, good at what they do, best in the business by a long way, and I credited them that it's a family business, because it's not easy. We all know that family businesses at that scale. I have 500 stores, 550 stores, I think, when I joined.
It's big.
So it's a big chain.
And were you doing property or a broader retail role?
Yeah, it was interesting because my role, I ended up working with a guy that John and Vaughan worked with, would you believe? A guy called Andrew Minogue. So my role was it was a senior role, and he actually couldn't sign off on a property until I signed off on it. So the way the business was structured, unless the P&L made sense, the property didn't go ahead, and I was the only one that could sign off on the P&L. So he had to wait for me to say yeah. So I worked closely with Andrew for those few years. Andrew left, I think, probably after 2 years maybe. So I worked closely with Andrew. So that's where I kind of got that property exposure. But I probably got to know the landscape and the environment through Myer, because I was in all the Myer stores through, and I travelled a bit. So it gave me a good grounding. Like whatever Myer did for me, albeit I didn't necessarily enjoy the red tape and the structure of that business, it did give me good grounding.
But that role was, from what I remember when we were first talking, that you were the CEO of those shops, effectively.
Yeah,
you ran
pretty
it.
much.
You did everything.
Yeah, pretty much. You hired, you fired, you signed off, you wrote off, you had P&L. It's full P&L accountability. which, to be honest, there's not a lot of retailers actually give out that kind of structure, you know, like, but it worked for them, you know, like, but so my EBITDA kind of bonus was all based on kind of like, you know, different percentage rates and stuff. So you're able to make the hard decisions, but then you live by them, right? You know, so if you wanted to drive margin, you could really drive margin. So all that kind of stuff. But so you were, in a sense, running your own business, right? And David Norman was great about it. I probably shouldn't have mentioned his name, but they were good about it because he'd back you. You know, you make a decision, rightly or wrongly, they'd back you, that family. So it was good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
So you went from running your own business to a large corporate to a big family business, and then ended up finding these other two blokes that you wanted to join the dark side and actually help other retailers and franchisors. So how did that play out for you?
Serendipity, some might say. I probably met John through local community soccer. I think that's where I first met John, and it started, and it was a stop-start because John went to the States probably very shortly after our relationship started, let's say. I think we had a very minimal communication throughout the time John was in LA. You know, a couple of texts here, maybe, and so maybe an email, you know. And I
was the president of the soccer club, and I caught up with Keith, and I'm pretty sure he walked away going, "This guy has no fucking idea what he's doing." Which he was absolutely right.
Yeah, and then he handed me the reins, and then I was the president. So.
We did know what he was doing then.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think he did. He saw me coming. Yeah. But some of those meetings, I'll never forget some of those meetings in John's house. Bloody hell! Like I've been at more. Like they were more vicious than some board meetings I've been at, and I've been at a lot of executive meetings with Myer and with JPL. Where, you know, some people walk out in tears, but some of our committee meetings, because me and John were trying to turn the wheel in the soccer club in those days and really try and professionalise it, to be honest. We were really trying to give the kids that wanted to play a real window and opportunity to kind of play, and for a community club, a lot of people were pushed against that. So they were interesting times, but so then when John got back, we had a coffee, basically. I think it was, you know, he said, "What are you up to?" So, you know, I'm still doing the same thing, and he said he enjoying it. John's very... He is a way with questions, and he is a way with getting into your darkest secrets. So we had numerous conversations. And look, at that time, to be honest, Bruce, like 5 years, I was kind of I was over that role. You know, So, and I probably would have done something for myself. The chances are, you know, you need a comfort blanket, don't you, to do that. I probably didn't jump earlier because of that. I was still very conscious of kind of, what I put my family through before. So you kind of go, you got to keep a steady Eddie, right? You got to be the main bread earner, and you got to do the right thing and make sure the kids get through college and all that. So that probably stopped me actually retailing at an earlier stage. That whole concept of, fuck, what if things go bad again? Which again, I always say to some of my clients, it's you shouldn't think like that, because you do make mistakes. You will make mistakes, but you can bounce back from them. And it's how you do that is all the more important. So it was interesting. It was probably done pretty quickly, but I came in a different guise. I mean, I came in with nobody really knowing a lot about me. I think it's fair to say, and like John's not one for titles, and neither am I, but we kind of had to put a title on the role, so it was kind of like, well, fucking let's go COO or something like that, this fancy shit name or whatever. So we went in with that role, but I obviously needed a little bit of time to try and get my feet under the table and understand the business. But that wasn't going to happen, Bruce, because I started on the 5th of February and the 17th of March the whole world caved in with COVID. So it's been an interesting journey. But I
will say it was always, I've certainly understood, and I know Vaughan understood that we needed to get someone to come in and be a genuine CEO of our business. And what impressed me with Keith so much is he was a great generalist. He'd done it, and he wasn't just a property person, and that's what we needed, someone who had the ability to take it to the next step. So we went to, it was early February. You started, and then we had a conference, and we were a bit worried about that the guys were going to think, who's this donkey from Ireland that was just started. And within about a half an hour, he had everyone's respect in the room. It was, and then everyone shut up and listened to what he said, and he'd only been there for 5 minutes, and that's the mark of the man. So I certainly knew at that point we'd made the right decision. And then I never saw him for 2 years.
We got locked in our houses.
Except for Zoom calls, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So you've navigated your way through the GFC, navigated your way in a different business through COVID, and so what sort of advice have you got for business owners and going through these challenges and then coming out the other side?
Yeah, look, I think there really is a lot you can take. I think you've got to expect the unexpected. Okay, that's a big one. I think you do need to be very, very mindful of your profitability in your business and what that's producing. So whether you're looking at that weekly or monthly, I think the financial side of the business, let's call it, the overall picture, it is so important. If you don't have someone in house, make sure you've got a really good accountant that you work closely with. So expect the unexpected from that perspective, and squirrel away 5% of your monthly profits if you can, and don't let your partner see it. That's a big one. We're on to our fourth squirrel account in our business now.
Secret squirrel.
Yeah. So I think that's really important, Bruce. But I think ultimately, I suppose it's know your customer for me. Know your customer, because even in the bad times, you can change, you can duck, you can dive, you can weave. If you ultimately know what your customer needs and how you can help them, you've always got a chance. You'll always have a chance. And I think it's hard to differentiate yourself now in business because there's so many people doing similar things to what you do. But that's not the reason not to do it. If you've got passion, if you feel you've got good people around you. And I think with BDC, that's where we're lucky because, we're relatively, I've got the CEO title, but we're a flat organisation to a point. I've got really, really, really experienced guys around me from the property side that could teach me a thing or two. But it's like herding cats at times. But having good people around you is paramount to any business success at any level. And gladly we've got some good people around us. And finally, I'll probably say to get out of bed every day, you want to be able to go to work and have a smile on your face with the people you work with and your customers if you can, because I think that's what will keep you engaged and keep you on point.
And just one thing that you touched on before about your structure. Making sure your structure's right, because I know we've sat in, and Bruce, you're the same, even more so, that we've sat in a room with people that are starting out new businesses or whatever, and they've got everything in their name and all their assets and everything, and they're not structured the right way. That's a very big thing.
I think it's most entrepreneurs have a pretty high appetite for risk, and so it's balancing that appetite, whether it be the right people around you to help you manage that, or just a sense of your squirrel account and having to manage that risk, because all things if all your chips are there, it can go horribly wrong, and you've got to be prepared for that. So just making sure that you're balancing it out.
Yep.
I think we're nearly done.
Okay,
thank you.
Cool.
But so this was Tell Us Your Effing Story, franchising story. You're now working with franchisors. So thank you very much, Keith. Thanks for sharing your story with us today.
No, thanks for having
really
me.
enjoyable.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, guys.
Good on you.